Välkomna till den här lite mer familjära forskningsfrukosten idag. Det är ju coronatider så att ni vet ju varför vi måste hålla ett betydligt begränsat deltagande här. Men vi är väldigt glada att ni är här och vi kommer även sända detta digitalt på Facebook sen så att man kommer kunna följa det även om man inte fick möjligheten att få plats här. Jag heter Kalle Pettersson och jobbar som utvecklingschef i Helsingborg stad och även chef för FoU-enheten. Där vi även har Annika som sitter här som är en av medarbetarna. De här forskningsfrukostarna tror jag att de flesta har varit här vid tidigare tillfällen och det är någonting vi har hållit på med nu i kanske 3 år skulle jag tänka mig. Och kommer vi fortsätta med dem även framgent i den här formen men förhoppningsvis med möjlighet att ta in lite mer gäster framåt. Och bara, även om man inte varit här innan så kan jag berätta lite att vi börjar nu 8:15. Håller på med en forskningspresentation fram till ungefär 9:30. Och sen kommer det vara möjlighet att ställa frågor och reflektioner till forskaren under en halvtimme ungefär. Så klockan 10 är det klart. Och under den tiden så kommer det inte vara någon officiell paus. Så måste man hämta kaffe eller gå på toaletten så kan man smyga ut lite lätt bara. Men glöm inte att komma tillbaka sen. Vad kan vi säga mer? Vi kan även göra reklam för de 2 kommande forskningsfrukostarna som är under hösten, vintern. Och vi har i, vad blir det nu, november månad en datum första fredagen i varje månad. Jag kommer inte ihåg vilken datum det är. Men då kommer Magnus Adenskog hit och pratar om olika former av utökade demokratimodeller. Vad är det finns det olika sätt att utöka demokratin i ett samhälle? Det kommer bli väldigt spännande tror jag. Och kanske någonting man skulle kunna använda sig av i Helsingborg. Och i december kommer Martin Fransson från Centrum för tjänsteforskning från Potsdams Universitet och pratar om sin forskning om självorganiserade team på Försäkringskassan. Det kommer också bli väldigt, väldigt bra, tror jag, eller vet jag. But today we have a very special guest. We have Professor Sabine Kuhlman from the Potsdams Universitet. And you are actually our first international guest, so be very honored. And we're glad to have you here because I met you, I think it was a year ago when you made a presentation in Lund at the KFU-dagen as well, I think it was. About, as you can see here, the digitalization of local public services in Germany. And I thought that was a very, very good presentation because all of those issues and problems and possibilities that you could see in the German public sector when you're trying to digitalize it is just the same as we see here in Sweden when we're trying the same. We can see all these barriers we have to come across, and I got quite a big understanding about why are these barriers here and how can we force them in some way. So I think that you will, as well as I did, I think this talk is very good because you can apply it in your work here in Helsingborg in Sweden, I think. So, Sabine, you're very welcome to us here in Helsingborg and this research breakfast. Please.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. You raised the expectations now very high, so I hope I can fulfill them. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to Helsingborg. I just had a brief walk through the city yesterday, so I enjoyed it very much. I'm very happy to be here. I think this is a very interesting format, actually. So I like it also, this kind of setting here, and to talk with you afterwards, probably. Well, so as Kalle said, my presentation is on the digitalization of public services, specifically at the local level of government in Germany. We did some research on this at Potsdams Universitet, focused on local public services, so I will present also some findings from this research project. But before doing so, I will also give you a brief introduction into the overall setting of digital policies in Germany and what obstacles, what problems we are facing, specifically in the federal system, because Germany being a federal system, there are some quite complicated institutional structures which also impact on the pace and the degree of digitalization. So I try to provide you a kind of picture and overview on this. For you to better understand the setting, I have inserted this graph on the administrative system in Germany, so that you see what kind of levels we have. So we have the federal level, federal administration. Then we have 16 Länder, which are states, individual states, autonomous states. And then we have the local level here with counties, and cities, municipalities. So that is probably comparable to Sweden with regions and municipalities. And so I will talk about, when talking about the local digitalization, it's this level of the municipalities. And for Germany, we also have to keep in mind that the federal administration is not that important in terms of service delivery. So we also do not have these very important agencies as you have in Sweden. So this is basically ministerial administration, ministries, policy making. So they are not that much involved in service delivery. So when talking about service delivery, it's more Länder and even more local governments, so quite decentralized. Germany has a problem in terms of digitalization when comparing it with other countries. And as you see from this digital agenda index, which is published every year, you are better performing in Sweden than we do. So we are in the last third from this comparative perspective. And this is more and more seen as a problem, that countries like Portugal or Ireland, Austria are obviously performing better when it comes to the digitalization of public administration. So this is really on public administration, not in general. But so therefore, it's seen increasingly as a problem that we are lagging behind to some extent and need to be quicker. And that gets even more problematic if you see the development over time, where we see that Germany, which is the red line, has improved over time in this index, but the distance to the European average has also increased. So the other countries seem to be even quicker than Germany. So we have to do something about it. And this is at least what politicians now have realized at all levels of government, that something needs to happen. And I would say the corona crisis as well has triggered something, has pushed administrations and politicians towards investing more energy, but also more money. So quite high amounts of money have now been allotted and allocated to specifically local governments. I think it's a 3 billion euro now with the corona crisis, with economic rescue also has been allocated to local governments to increase their degree of digitalization. So something is really happening now. Well, I have to maybe like this. But why is that? That Germany is lagging behind to some extent? Why do we have these problems? And there are a number of reasons. And as you rightly said, probably some of them are comparable to your country. So we could see where we have commonalities and can discuss about these problems. Both of our countries have a legalist culture. So, and Germany has a quite strong legalist orientation in public administration. And this is connected to huge numbers of written form requirements, documentation requirements. So things you really have to deliver in a written form. You have to go to administration to present yourself, and it's not possible to do it online. So there are authentication and attendance requirements, and it's very difficult to get them out of the law, to say, okay, let's try to do without and try to do it in a digital manner. And all these attempts to screen the law, to screen the norms we have with the question on what can be left away and what can be digitalized, this hasn't been successful so far, because the ministries, the federal ministries who formulate these legislations, they say, oh no, we do need them. We need these requirements. We cannot just delete them from the law. And therefore this kind of, we call norm screening, which was done in the federal government, was not successful. So still we have to work on this to reduce the written form requirements. And we have a problem that is maybe not that important in your country, but in Germany we do not have this culture of transparency. So there is a historically grounded fear in Germany of the transparent citizen. And therefore, there is a very restrictive data protection law. Privacy rules are very strict. And so far, there hasn't been a modernization of these rules. And also in the population, there's a certain fear towards, I could be controlled, the transparency is a problem. And when introducing in Germany, for instance, the Corona, it was this app, Corona tracking app. So there's a great resistance from the side of the citizens to download this app on their mobile phones. So therefore, there's a kind of hesitation also regarding digitalization. And apart from this, there are some technical problems, of course, which we probably all face. The basic digital components are so far lacking. And when we talk about to introduce the so-called once-only principle, which means you insert your data only once and then it's shared amongst administrations. So that you only need to insert them once to administration. This once-only principle cannot really be implemented because we do not have the basic components for this. For instance, the sharing of data amongst or between administrations, or the connecting of registries. We need to connect various kinds of registries in order to be able to share these data. And here we do not have the basis yet. So there's a strong debate at the moment, or discussion in politics, to modernize our landscape of registries, to connect them to each other. Because you have a registry on birth, you have a registry on houses, and so you need to connect them to really make this once-only principle alive. This debate is still ongoing, and so still not a solution found how to come to a modernization of registries, which other countries have done. I don't know how it is in Sweden, but I know from Austria years ago they have found solutions to modernize registries, and now they can have this once-only principle. Okay, this is technical, so these are more technical problems. And then we have in the federal system also institutional problems, governance problems, on the question how to steer all these policies across levels. So how do we come to a kind of standardized procedures, standardized services also across federal and local level, and who decides for this, and if it's voluntary for local governments, how do we come to the same degree of digitalization standard across the country? So these are questions of governance and to organize digitalization policies. And from this slide, you don't have to read it. Just it's just an impression how the digitalization policies are organized in Germany. So, and you can imagine if you see all these boxes and actors and the different institutions and levels, that it's really complicated. And decision making is so complex and complicated. Just very roughly to show you who is involved. So this is the federal level. So you have all the federal ministries. At least 5 of them are predominantly responsible for digitalization. So it's at least 5, and all the others are involved to some extent. But all have to do with digitalization because they are formulating the laws and they have to take into account how to digitalize them afterwards. Then we have an intergovernmental body which is composed of Länder, so the states, and the federal level. It's the IT Council. And this is a very tough body, so they are not really able to take decisions. They are discussing a lot. They have quite a lot of money, but decision-making is very, very tough. well, we have the federal government, we have the Länder, so we have states and local governments also involved in this process. We have various conferences of various ministries, ministers. And all of them have their competencies in this huge project of digitalization of the public administration. So what is probably interesting, just to mention, that in 2017 there has been a new law saying that until 2022, about 600 services in Germany must be digitalized. And these services include federal, Länder, but specifically local services. So there is an obligation now in the law for all levels to collaborate with each other to digitalize these roughly 600 services. And what they did in order to come to this aim is to form laboratories, digitalization laboratories, where actors from different levels, but also private actors, involved stakeholders in a certain service, work together to develop solutions. And so we have now hundreds of these laboratories, digitalization laboratories, where they work together and where they develop solutions. And then the next step is, if you have a kind of click dummy, so you have the first solution, to roll them out in the country. And this is the more difficult step, to convince all the local governments, to convince all these administrations, please take this solution, because we want to have a kind of standardized solution. And that's now ongoing and quite a tricky process. And we are not so optimistic that all of these 600 services will really be digitalized in 2 years. We have elections next year, and then let's see how far we are. So this is really a huge project, and therefore it's so complicated also. Well, so we have governance problems. Yes, of course, digital solutions, IT systems are designed for cross-border collaboration, for interoperability networks across different departments, across different ministries and task areas. And therefore, digitalization must be kind of collective work, which is especially important in fragmented political systems, as we have in Germany with the states and the Länder and very autonomous local governments. They must work together and resolve this kind of multi-level problem in the administrative system. Well, there is therefore a necessity, an institutionalized necessity to collaborate cross levels, cross departments, or in a horizontal manner across departments, but also vertically across levels. And this is what I said, the Online Access Act of 2017, which obliges all the levels and all the entities to digitalize roughly 600 services in 14 thematic areas. And here you can show it's not that up to date, so we need to update it a bit. How the different Länder, so you have the Länder, this is the task areas here. For instance, you see environment, then you have, so the various task areas is this. And then you have the responsible state for one of these areas. Here are the states, so one lead state for each task area. The participating other states, and then the status of how far they are in developing solutions for digital services. And here you can see where there's green, so it's finished, which means they have found a solution. They have, in these laboratories, developed something for various services in this thematical area. But the more important and difficult step is now the rollout. So rolling it out through the whole Federal Republic. And this is to be achieved until 2022. And we are not yet there, so it's still ongoing process. Well, so that's the overall setting, how we are trying to also be a bit, to advance a bit in the overall federal setting. And it was not easy to convince all the Länder to participate. So for instance, Bavaria, they said, oh no, we won't participate because we are already quite advanced and we don't need the federation, we don't need the other states, so we can do our own solutions. And as all this is voluntary, there can't be an enforcement by the federal level towards Länder and local government. They had to be convinced, please join this, please participate in the project. And now they are also responsible for one of these task areas. I don't know where they are. Here, this says the gap has been closed, is here, because this was Bavaria was restraining. So there's much, the principle of voluntariness is sometimes a bit tricky here. So now I would like to turn to some of our research findings, which are more specifically focusing on the local level, on local services. And we had a project on where we focused on the one-stop shops. So we called local one-stop shops, where citizens can go and have various kinds of services, such as licensing services so registration. So I will show you to see how advanced these local one-stop shops are, because they are the most important units at the local level in direct contact to the citizens. So where there are most contacts to the citizens are performed. And so digitalization is seen from the perspective of the citizens as a very important field there. Well, that's the background. So they are these local one-stop shops. They are units of local governments. They also show that in Germany, as in Sweden, local governments enjoy many functions. They are functionally strong. They have a broad profile of competencies. And these local one-stop shops, also with the debate of new public management in the 1980s, were introduced in almost every municipality with more than 15,000 inhabitants. So all of them have these local one-stop shops as a customer-friendly access for the citizens to go to the local government. So they bundle services across various fields of citizen-related services in a single window access. And some of the services which you can find there are passport, certificates of marriage, birth certificates, registry affairs, driving licenses, car registration. I know that in Sweden some of these services are in agencies and state agencies. So this is what colleagues told me. So it seems to be organized a bit differently. In Germany, it's the municipalities responsible to deliver these services. It's a delegated state task, but municipalities, local governments are responsible, counties and municipalities, to deliver these services to the citizens. So what we did in this research project was we had a representative survey in Germany in municipalities with more than 15,000 inhabitants. And there was a questionnaire sent to mayors and staff council representatives. So in order to have the perspective of the employees also, because oftentimes these perspectives contrast the chief executive officer, the mayor, and the employees. So you have quite huge contrasts sometimes. And therefore we had this survey for these two groups of stakeholders. And in addition, in selected cities, we had case studies. So we conducted 4 case studies in German cities and different regions, where we, besides interviews with many stakeholders, also conducted representative staff surveys and representative citizen surveys in these selected cities. So that's the empirical basis here. So we were already talking about the hurdles. So what kind of hurdles did they report us, and did we find when analyzing these one-stop shops in terms of digitalization? So we found that oftentimes the political pressure from the local council, from the local politicians towards digitalization is rather low. So there's not quite a high priority of really strategic digital projects in the municipality. So many of the managers, the administrative staff are complaining about lack of strategic political orientation. So this is something that is criticized. And therefore, when you see initiatives in cities, e-government initiatives, digitalization projects, they are rather sporadic, incremental, and not really overarching and strategic. And this is something criticized because then it's limited in time. If one person changes, then the whole project dies. And so there's a need for more strategic orientation. And also clear objectives regarding digitalization are often missing. And that's also criticized. Finances, I guess that finances that's now improving with the money allocated from the federal government. But many of the municipalities claimed that digitalization budgets, so specific money dedicated to digitalization, is missing, or at least not sufficient. And also the same as with the overall federal structure, governance is a problem. How to steer and to govern digitalization projects. And so some more effective governance structures in the municipalities are needed to push projects and to bring it forward. When implementing local digital services, there is oftentimes a problem that there are some services working quite well. So there are some forms in the internet where you can have really transaction with the municipalities. So there's a service which works well. And then are many services from the same municipality which do not work very well. They are also there, nobody uses them, they have been developed, but they are not working very well. And for the citizen now, it's a problem to distinguish these groups of services. So the citizen doesn't know there is something which really works well, which I can use. But otherwise, there are other services. If he uses this service, he won't be successful, because then in the end he has anyway go to the municipality. And if you can't distinguish these types of services, then citizens are disappointed and say, okay, I just leave it. I go to the municipality. It's then at the end time saving. And therefore we have this problem of a distinction between good, very well working services and others which do not work well. And here for the municipalities, a kind of marketing strategy is missing, to advertise those services which are really good and where the citizen is recommended, please use this. It will be a relief for you. It will be an easier way to approach administration. Digital marketing concept is another thing which is emphasized by the practitioners. So we asked the employees, what is, from your perspective, digitalization? So how do you perceive it in your day-to-day work? Asking the employees. And this is striking that a high proportion of those interviewed or in the survey, asked in the survey, they see the scanning of documents. That's digitalization in their day-to-day work. So this is what they experience. Electronic responses to citizens, so sending emails, basically. That's also digitalization for quite a majority. And then what works quite well in Germany is this online appointing or online appointment scheduling. So you can have an appointment with the administration online, and then the flow of clients is more facilitated. So online appointing schedule, online appointment, that's also something which is, from their point of view, digitalization. But what digitalization is actually not, or not for a majority, is the complete electronic processing of services. So this is not so many saying, yes, complete transaction, digital transaction with the citizen. This is something we experience. That's not so many. Well, so far it's quite not that an advanced status of digitalization in these local one-stop shops. And asking the citizens, what are your experiences and what is your expectations? We see specifically in this field of the question, how important or to what extent do you expect from your administration user-friendly online options to carry out my requests? So regarding expectations, it's quite high. So many of them are expecting this. But the reality, so the experiences, is much lower. And that's a huge difference between reality and expectations of about 25%, where you see that reality doesn't match with what citizens are expecting in terms of online services. There are also other things which I won't explain here, waiting times and so on, where you also have discrepancies between expectations and reality. So citizens are expecting more than is delivered, actually. Now checking for how advanced are these local one-stop shops, how far is their degree of digitalization. We made a distinction which is taking from the typology in literature about 3 steps of digital maturity. The first is if just information is available. So you go to the internet, you see some information on a certain service and can inform you. The second one is partial online processes. So you have forms to be downloaded, you can fill them in, you can even hand them in. So there's a partial online process. And then the final degree is that a whole transaction can be processed online. So you don't have to go to the administration anymore. It's possible to do it online from the beginning of the process to the end, including payment functions and whatever. So that's a full online process. And then we asked for a variety of services, from passports, registration of residency, dog tax registration, which is important in cities, housing benefits. So there are various services delivered by these one-stop shops. And then the degree of maturity, digital maturity. And you can see here from the fully online process, full online processes, it's a very, very low minority of cities who offer this. And one can even question if this is true, for instance, here with passports, these 2%, because the legal conditions aren't even available to have it online. So I don't know whether they are lying here, but because these 2% are a bit... It's not so many municipalities to have full online processes. There's quite a huge percentage of those who have the information function, who are somehow present in the internet, and a partial online process, but this full transaction function without any media breaks, this is not existing in a high percentage of municipalities. And this is why they work in this Online Access Act in the digital laboratories to improve this situation. Because oftentimes it's not decided by the municipalities not to do it, but it's the legal situation. So you cannot digitalize certain processes because the law says you must go there, you must have your signature there, or you have to hand in documents. And against this background, it is probably not that such a surprise that from the perspective of the staffs, the employees, the digitalization is regarded as rather critical. And so far there is not so much relief from their perspective, because it's obviously not that advanced and not working very well. So when asking them about rather positive effects or a more negative effect, you see that the percentage of those agreeing on negative effects, so that there are more negative effects, is higher than the positive ones. So here they are a bit hesitant. They say, oh, okay, of course there are some improvements, transparency, that you are not bound to the opening hours anymore, and the processes are improved. So there is also agreement here. There's not so much agreement regarding reduction of workload. So there's just a minority saying, yes, it has reduced my workload. Digitalization has a reduced workload. No, that's just a minority. And then regarding all these negative, possibly negative effects of being constantly available, technical problems, software issues, computer issues, but also processing time per case, they say there are rather negative effects. So it hasn't really contributed to improve their work situation. And that's something we were not expecting when conducting this survey. So we were not expecting such a high degree of criticism towards what the employees are experiencing. And so that needs to be taken into account when further developing these projects. Well, and that's again the staff's perspective on the question on to what extent has the digitalization contributed to work intensity, availability, and so on. And just to pick this, again, it's being constantly available online for the managers, increasing workloads via email traffic, which they have to work with in the back office, is also something where they say it has strongly increased, quite strongly increased. So there seems to be in some areas even an increase in workload than a relief, which shows that the digitalization doesn't really work very well in these areas, and we have to make up our minds how to improve this situation. And then I would like to show you also something that you're probably also discussing in Sweden about about different views of age groups and what we call the generational gap, which we can observe. And from this slide, you can see that there are different age groups. So the blue one is from 18 to 29, then the light blue is 30 to 49, and then beyond 50. And you can see from all of these columns that the expectations of the younger population towards digitalization are higher. So, for instance, taking this example of time savings, so to what extent do you expect digitalization for you to save time, that you can save time due to digitalization? And there's a high percentage, a very high percentage of agreement, and it's conspicuously lower for the older people. They are also agreeing. they are agreeing, yes, I think I can spend, I can save time through digital service. So it's a majority of even the elderly, 50 plus. But it's significantly less than the younger one. So the expectations of the younger generation are higher towards digitalization. You have the same here, a reduction of administrative costs. So, but what is more striking is this, whether there are also fears and doubts towards digitalization. And here we have a very clear gap between the generations, because the elderly, the group of elderly people, has much more concerns and doubts regarding a fully digitalized public sector or local public sector. So when asking them, is the use of online services too complicated, for instance, quite a high percentage, or comparatively high percentage of older people are agreeing than younger ones. It's still a minority, so we have to take this into account. It's still 30%, so it's not a majority. But compared to the younger, you can see this difference. The same with, I need face-to-face consultancy. So there are more elderly people agreeing than younger ones. And the personal contact to the local administration is more important than online services, again, more agreement. Still, it's a minority, which needs to be taken into account, but you have this gap, which is quite obvious. Now, let me summarize some of these findings. So we can clearly see that from our research that citizens as well as employees are predominantly in favor of more digitalization. All these doubts and fears notwithstanding, they are in favor of having a more digitalized local service. Time-saving expectation is very high, specifically regarding the younger generation. And about 90% of the citizens see this, specifically the younger ones, see time-saving expectations as very important. For the citizens, user-friendly online services are very important. So for 80% of them, it's important, but this doesn't match with their experiences. So for only 54% of the citizens, this requirement is really fulfilled. Therefore, we have this gap between expectations and reality. In most of the municipalities, we see that information is available online, whereas full transaction is not possible. And this is something which is now worked on, and hopefully there will be made some progress in the next years. What we also see in Germany, I don't know how this is in Sweden, that there is not a very standardized format of service delivery. And so there is no single service in Germany which is delivered in a standardized manner across the country. So it's in each municipality it's a bit different. So it's there are huge differences in the usability, for instance, and how user-friendly a service is towards the citizen. And so there is no uniform process across the country. Everybody does it a bit differently, and this is a problem for these digital laboratories to roll out their solutions, because municipalities oftentimes want to keep their individuality, their individual digital solutions which they have developed. What is also striking is that only 10% of the citizens we surveyed really use the electronic access to the local government. So this is really a very low minority. And about half of them say they couldn't do it without personal advice. It's so complicated. So they are not able to do it. Some say, the older ones, that they prefer the personal contact in general. But what is interesting is that almost 90% of the surveyed citizens would fully or partially make use of digital services if they were as easy to process online as in private platforms, which they know, Amazon, Otto, Zalando. So if it was that easy to do, they would do it. So it's a problem with the usability standards, with user-friendliness of these services. So citizens are ready, many are ready to do it, but it's not user-friendly, it's complicated. So, and I think this needs to be taken into account for local governments when designing these services, to think them from a user perspective and not from their service delivery perspective. And this is something maybe which has gone wrong, that the perspective is this of the service delivery function and not the user, the client. And so the user friendliness is probably something which needs to be taken more seriously. Well, this is something we already... yes, and we talked about positive and negative impacts about from the staff perspectives, and there are of course positive impacts, as they say, higher transparency, not to be bound to opening hours and so on. So they appreciate also these positive effects, and specifically the managers are very positive, more positive than the street level bureaucrats. But there are these already mentioned more negative impacts, which are considered by some as being even more important than the positive ones. That processing time has increased even per case. The constant availability pushes pressures on the staffs. Many of them encounter technical problems, which then increases the time per case. So there are burdens which they consider as, at the moment at least, more important than the possible work relief they are expecting. So finally, I would like to turn to this problem or this debate about standardization, centralization. So digitalization is feared by some as a push towards more centralization. So local governments are also fearing that they will lose autonomy due to digitalization, because everything now gets standardized. Even the federal government says, so you get money if you implement a standardized solution. So there seems to be a kind of trend towards more standardization and probably centralization. On the other hand, an autonomous local government in Germany is regarded as something very important. I guess in the Swedish case, it's the same, that a high degree of local discretion and variance across the country is also important to meet the very specific regional, local demands. And so we have this debate whether standardization should be pushed by the states and the federal government. And some, even local managers, say, yes, that we need such a kind of push towards more standards, more uniform procedures. That seems to be important to improve and to advance. And there are some examples where we have more standardization, for instance, in car registration, that's more standardized across the country. So it seems to work. So it's also welcomed even by local managers. But then we also encountered critique in our interviews regarding this trend. And some of the managers said, well, the state and the federal governments, they cannot decide for us. They are too far away. They are too remote, and they do not know how to grasp the things on the local level. And therefore, the local practice, the practice knowledge of local government is very important to develop these digital solutions, which is actually done in the laboratories. So there are local actors sitting there too, but maybe not that it should be more. So the local influence should be more important and more relevant when developing these solutions, and also when formulating new laws. That local practice knowledge should be consulted here. So they say solutions should come from the local level. There should be a kind of bottom-up strategy when developing digital solutions, and the street-level knowledge is indispensable when it comes to well-functioning digital solutions. And so, therefore, we have to wait and see how this Online Access Act of 2017 will work out, whether we really come to a kind of standardization regime, and whether the federal government will impose something here. But there are, of course, also constitutional hurdles for this. Well, I hope also that the influence of subnational actors, of the local actors in implementing the Online Access Act in the digital laboratories will increase and will be more important. Some important key questions still remain for the future. So how can we achieve this kind of rollout of centrally developed solutions all over the country? How can they be transferred from one jurisdiction to the other, from one state, from one municipality to the other? We still have this principle of voluntariness. We cannot enforce the local governments, neither the lender, to comply. And so how can we achieve a kind of right balance between standardization, probably centralization on the one hand, and decentral variety and diversity on the other hand? And so that's from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to receive your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, I think. I hope there are some, or a lot of questions from the audience. If you can think them out, or want to ask Sabine, or just reflect, or something. So on.
To digest all this.
So on, yeah. No, Annika first.
Okay. No, I haven't formulated this as a question, but I mean, I understand there are many reasons why the services aren't especially user friendly, but still, I wonder, is it like also a question about competence? Because the municipality are not, their main task isn't to develop digital solutions, and compared to Sweden, we have the issue to. It's not so easy to invite external partners to help us develop the services to make them as good as the Zalando or something. Could that also be part of the problem that you have to find the solutions yourself internally, and that it could be helpful to work more together with external partners, professional partners. Probably I didn't emphasize this issue of know-how, digital know-how, which I should have done. I think it's on another slide where we emphasize these kinds of hurdles also. And I think you mentioned a very important one, that the professional know-how to develop digital solution, but also to steer digitalization policies in the organization to achieve this kind of organizational change is not sufficient in the municipality. So we really have a shortage in personnel capacities and professional personnel, and not just in the digitalization sector. It's in general, we have this problem of staff shortage to recruit professional personnel. And so, yes, I agree, they do not really have, specifically at the local level, the specialists which they would need to develop these more advanced services. What we observe is that, as you say, they try to collaborate with external partners, but also amongst each other in intermunicipal arrangements.
So there are the smaller municipalities connecting to bigger ones, or there are networks of municipalities in order to jointly develop something. And this is also how you can increase the digital know-how in the public sector. But many of them also are involving private partners now. But I think this is something that needs to be developed in the future even further. And it's one of the explanations why it's working not that well so far. Yeah.
One problem I get to sometimes, it's the colleagues of mine that meet the customers, or they sometimes think that the customers are less digitalized than they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So it also needs kunskap, knowledge, how the society are digitalized. One thing is the bank identification we have in Sweden. People say, I don't think they have it. And I was like, yeah. And then I get this statistics that 98% of people in this have bank identification.
Yeah.
And that's like, okay. But you have like, oh, they maybe don't have a computer. I mean,
Yeah, that's true. And still, for equal treatment reasons, which you have in Germany, which we have in Germany and you in Sweden too, you still have to offer a physical thing, analog service, and so therefore you still cannot shift completely to a digital solution, which is then why the reduction of costs or the increase of efficiency isn't really there, because you still have to offer two paths, the analog one and the digital one, and that's true, yeah. And I don't know whether we really have an overview in Germany about how advanced citizens actually are. I guess there are surveys about this too, and probably the staff, the employees are skeptical, as you said, to the same extent as you say. So yes, I would agree that's an issue too. The mutual expectations between employees and the citizens. Yeah.
I think your question, what strikes me when I see your slides, is that if the staff is not that interested in the digitalization because they think the software is bad, think that it will be a bigger workload for them, they think it's a strange thing to do, and then they won't promote the digital services, even if they have one. They think that if I promote the digital services to this customer, or this citizen, then it will get me much more problem or troubles, and then you probably don't do it, and then we have this gap that probably will be even wider because no one uses them. So I think that is very striking. Yeah,
that's tricky, and this is why one has to work on these solutions, on usability, user-friendliness, but not only from the perspective of the citizen, but also from the staff's perspective. They also are users of these services. So if they see it's really a relief, it's something that helps, that improves, that saves time, then they will promote it. And therefore, one really needs to work on these basic components of the services. And this is something I think what needs to be done, and we need some legal changes here. Oftentimes a city, for instance, we have a very advanced city as Bremen in the north of the country, and they are trying several digital solutions in the field of child services, parental leave and so on, birth certificate. They are advancing, and then they say, well, but just to a certain degree, and then the legal provisions stop us. We cannot go further, because if we want, then we need to connect the registries. They are not connected. We are not allowed to share the data. So we have to ask the citizens to insert their data again and again and again. We cannot advance anymore. And therefore, I think for the Federation, it's a task to say, how can we change legal provisions to facilitate this? So I think it's an important issue.
Okay. I can start. So my background is I am German. I came to Sweden 15 years ago. So I have to deal with both the Swedish local services and the German ones. In Sweden there's a lot more you can do online, certificates and so on. Most of the stuff you don't even do. If you give birth, it's automatically in the register. You don't do anything. Germany also tends to have a use of words which are not easy to understand for a normal person. So whatever you actually want to do at the municipalities where you have to get certificates, it's really hard to understand just the language. What do they actually mean? So at the end, you call them. So that's one thing. And then what I also feel what is missing in Germany is some way to authenticate yourself. So we have this bank identification which you named. It's already for when you log into a service, it's kind of a digital signature. It's me with this number and so on. Are there any thoughts on this coming up? Because it's quite the basic thing. If you cannot,
it is.
Everything has to have a stamp
Absolutely.
and a signature in Germany. That's how I feel at least.
Yeah.
If they don't get rid of it, there's no way to make it.
Absolutely. And this is what I mean with basic components. We do not have that. It's debated, and the most so the newest, most recent idea is to use the tax ID, to use your tax ID as a standard identification number. I think it will fail because there are so much resistance towards having one ID due to this fear on the transparent citizen. And they relate it even to the Nazi dictatorship. We don't want to be controlled by the state. We don't want to have this single number where I can be identified. So there's so much resistance, and I think it will go. So the Ministry of Interior has formulated a law on this. It's now in the discussion in the legal process. But I think the Constitutional Court will abolish it, and therefore. Yes, that's a problem, that we do not have these basic components of identification, authentication, which we need to implement all this, the once only principle and so on. So let's see how this works out. There will be a decision this year, still this year, on this law. If there is a kind of identification, ID, which you can use then for several services, then it will be a kind of revolution, bring us a step forward, but we are not there yet. And the other point on the legal language, yes, I agree. I completely agree. This is part of the legalist culture, and probably we are stronger or more bureaucratic there than Sweden is. So it's a very German legalist thinking and speaking and writing. And there are also debates about how to improve the comprehensibility of the language in forms, in processes. But it's also a very slow process to improve this and to make it more accessible language-wise for the citizens. Yeah.
I come from a court, and we're having this problem with decentralization and standardization, because every court is their own authority, but we have another higher authority who's taking care of all technique and development and digitalizations, and they're having problems with making things standards, because every court has their own way, and they actually you don't get to force them somehow. You have to, like you said, you have to persuade them that you need this, you know. And they're having problems with like bigger courts and small courts, because the small courts would rather go back to like a system that they had before, because it was more simple for them. And they're like a family. You have small courts that has like 10 people working there, and this is a problem because we're not getting anywhere. For the big courts, we're really frustrated that we're not getting somewhere. And I think you were talking about that, and the thing about making usability systems, like you have to involve people that are going to use these things in an earlier stage. We're coming in like a pilot, really late on in the process of development projects. And we're seeing that they're making systems that, like, who are these for? You know, they think that they had like all of the needs in the project, but they don't. And then you're just working and spending a lot of money. Yeah, the usability, I just lost track now. But yeah, it was like about the usability and the thing that you were saying earlier about we don't have the money to like do a lot of development, and this higher authority that are doing the development for us, they're like working in this really stiff way. You have like the jurister.
The lawyers?
Yeah, but it's not lawyers in that matter. But yeah, you have the lawyers, and then you have the tech people, and then you have the engineers, and they're not working in groups of 12
Multidisciplinary.
Yeah, multidisciplinary teams, but they're like taking the matters from one group to another, and like, yeah, now we have a jurisdictional problem, then you take it to the lawyers. They are finding some other problems, and then you have to take it to the tech people. So they're not letting the project follow, or they're not letting the group form. You have to form the group after the project, and not like just letting the project go to different groups. So we have a lot of problems with this actually, and the usability from not knowing how we're supposed to handle this question. So it's a lot there.
I think this aspect of multidisciplinarity is also important, that you cannot just have the legal people there. So this is something how laws in Germany, and I guess in Sweden too, are generated, are formulated. So it's a legal perspective, from the legal perspective. But if you just stick with the legal perspective, then maybe you have a good law, but you cannot digitalize it. So you do not know how the process, how it will be implemented, how it looks in practice for administration. And therefore it's important at a very early stage to involve various perspectives and work in these multidisciplinary areas. And what we are discussing, at least in Germany, is to not just have these kind of digital laboratories ex post. So if the law already exists, the service is there, and then think about how we could digitalize it, but on an earlier stage, when a new legislation is being developed, already at the very beginning, think about the practicalities and how it can be digitalized. I know that in Denmark they have something like this, like a digital fitness check for new legislation. And they check it, how it can be digitalized and what hurdles could be. And then you can reframe the law or some of the legal provisions in the law. And this is something we are thinking about as well, but it's also not that easy to achieve, because then you have to really change the legalist process, the legislative process. And again, the ministries are not that open to such kind of cultural revolution.
A lot of laws are not written for tech solutions. They're really old, and you have to make a lot of changes in very big laws and make them more like tech friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Yeah.
And we have
No,
I say we have a difference on the state. They can make decisions digitalized, but we in the community, city council can't, because there are different laws.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You had a question about the digital labs, and I think you mentioned that it involves citizens in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that interesting. In what way are they involved, and how does it come about? How do you decide who gets involved? Mm-hmm. Because I think then it can speak to Julia's thinking about, like, do you include people who are at the extreme, those who are maybe more digitally excluded? How do you take those perspectives in mind versus the majority? And one thing also, whether it could address this idea or this sort of thinking I have, because I come from the States, where there's very low trust in the government. So I think that is one of the interesting differences I see having moved to Sweden, is that you can, it was a shock when I found out, like, everything is attached to my personal number. Like receipts, like my purchases in a store, if I return it, or my library. That's controversial in the United States. That you track what I'm reading, like how can that be used against me? So I think that's a really interesting question, and how we engage citizens in developing solutions. Could that help build more, in some small way, build more trust in governments and in the direction we're moving with digitalization?
Yeah, it might help if there's more involvement already in the development of solutions. Also more transparency, probably. I think for many citizens it's not very transparent how things are developed. And taking the Corona app, for instance, I think it was not that clear what data is published, who has access, and all these. So there needs to be some more transparency. So I think the process of generating all these innovation is important to increase trust. And on the laboratories, it's really an innovative format. We did not have that before. So for developing administrative processes, services, it's something really new, and everybody is very enthusiastic. All the levels, across levels, they are enthusiastic about this. It's in practice, it's organized by consultancy firms, actually. So there are big consultancy firms organizing these laboratories and taking care of that the right stakeholders are on board. And it's completely voluntary. So you cannot force any government or any stakeholder to go in there. But they are trying to recruit them to get stakeholders from various spheres. To make sure that everybody who is concerned by this law, by the implementation, is really in the laboratory and participates. And so far my impression is that still there could be improvements in terms of participation regarding local governments. So far it's more the federal ministries in these laboratories and some states than local governments. And I think it's important that local governments get better access to all this process. The Association of Municipalities are criticizing this. They say we need to have more better overview on what's going on here with this Online Access Act. So far we are not very well informed. So there also needs to be some progress in this direction. Yeah.
And so the consultancies are also involved in recruiting citizen participation.
Yes, they are organizing this. But there is some critique on not enough transparency about the slide I showed you with the different degrees of advancement is the only thing we know, and this is very rough. So we need to have more knowledge about what's actually going on in these laboratories, who is in and how do they come in. So that's not very transparent. And there is no website or something, or as we call single point of truth, where you can get all this information. And so I think there needs to be some improvement here also in documentation and showing what's going on actually here.
Really cool approach about this as a municipalities and local and government organization focusing on delivering the services instead of focusing on users like Zalando. I live partly in Berlin, and I can see that, for example, the service of changing the address, because I've been changing a couple of times, you need to get the appointment. It's usually there are no times about that.
Berlin is a very bad example.
Yeah, but a good example is the guy from Zalando wrote a script, and he's running a company, I don't know if it's still functional, where you can for $10 buy a time slot that he reserved in reserved. So you don't need to wait for those like 3 months. You can do it directly. And this is what I'm looking for. Other do you know examples of like entrepreneurs or startups which are starting on building of those services on top of the unused or not user-friendly government services, where they already like giving this user-friendly to the users? Because I paid 10 euros and skip those lines.
So this was a private one then? There was a private entrepreneur?
It's a private one.
Yeah, okay. And he could organize for you to be...
So what he basically do, he's going to the government
and he
website
arranges something,
to the Berlin, he reserved the time frames, and then when I want to have a time frame, so he can sell and change the name all the time.
Okay, I wasn't aware of this. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. Well, I know that there are some startup companies and IT companies coming up with new ideas on services and even additional services. One example that immediately jumps into my mind is with the refugee crisis, offering services, online services for refugees and for connecting the refugee manager of the municipality with the refugee. And so it's a specific app, for instance, they developed so that the refugee has a better overview on what services there are and what are the respective institutions he has to go to, what the state of process is, and so on. So they developed these apps and they collaborate with the municipalities too. And I think these kinds of innovations are increasing, but it always depends on the municipality, on someone sitting there saying, oh, that's interesting, let's do this. But it's evolving, so I think it's something that's coming up. But I didn't know this specific example of Berlin. Yeah, that's interesting.
We're talking about that as well in courts, like you have these civil cases that could be startups could actually make different solutions for civil cases and make people maybe pay more than they do at court, but having the matter quickly resolved than the courts do, because maybe they will get some
automatization, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Different word to say, and that they have different services that makes the dispute that you can resolve it much quicker, because time is money for the companies. So they might actually pay more to have another startup resolving these cases, and then we will lose them. So for us, we have to develop much in a bigger speed, because we will actually lose some of our cases. We can never lose the criminal cases, we could lose these disputes. They are simply like you could actually have a service that could easily resolve the disputes in much faster way. So that's also a thing we're like pushing on and telling the higher authority that we have to like do something for this, because we will lose these cases.
Påverkar det då rättssäkerheten, eller blir det att ni förlorar pengar, eller vad är det som händer?
Alltså vi tänker ju mest rättssäkert då, att då blir det liksom, it will be a money thing, a money question. The one who has money will have like alltså fördel att då kan man göra det snabbt. Har du pengar så kan du göra det snabbt, och då kanske du liksom vill. Men det är klart också att vi ska inte, alltså sånt borde ju vara statligt, och för att det blir mer rättssäkert.
But I have a question. When you research, have you seen some about the services that some kind of professionals are easier or more difficult to digitalize? Because my feeling in Sweden is that lawyers are not interested because they have strong professionality. Doctors are not possible, but they're not interested. They have strong professional as well, and social service workers are quite difficult as well. Whilst some other people in the public sector are much easier because they don't have this strong feeling. I'm a doctor. I'm doing things like this. I'm a lawyer, and we've always been doing this like this way. Have you seen something in these services?
Yes, we didn't really go into this researching it, so we didn't make a distinction between groups of professionals. But I would agree, and it's basically the same with what you said with lawyers, so therefore it's sometimes difficult with the ministries, because we have what we call the lawyers' monopoly in the ministries, and so for them it's really a cultural issue. They are trained in a legalist manner and thinking in legalist categories, and not how to digitalize it in a more technical manner, and that's a problem with ministries. I think the lower you go, the easier it gets. So it's easier to talk to local practitioners than to a ministerial bureaucrat or someone from the courts. Therefore, the closer you are in practice, and I think also working with the citizen in a direct manner, that's easier than to talk about digitalization and to have a common denominator on these issues. For some professionals, I would also agree with the doctors. I have seen surveys in Germany regarding e-health and some tools to digitalize the work of a doctor. They are very critical. And the Doctors Association, I think they even said, oh no, this will increase the time the doctors need to spend with the patient. So this, if we introduce this kind of digital tool, it won't help the doctors at all. It will double their time, and so it was so critical, and I think it was not successful at the end. They were really a strong resistance by the doctors to introduce this, and also they have concerns with privacy regarding the patient. So this is a very common argument by the doctors raised, that there is a problem with privacy in terms of dealing with the patient and patient data, health data, and so on. So this is a very sensitive area. So I would agree there, and there's more openness if you go to the general administration in a municipality, for instance. So there we met really people who want to do something and make it advance. So it's the more the generalists probably dealing with organizational issues, dealing with cross-cutting issues. Well, it's easier to talk to them. Yeah.
I think it's like a matter of also like fear of losing ground, or or money actually, because I wanted to sign a contract, and I asked a lawyer, and it was like, I don't know, 5,000 crowns. But I found a tjänst that could make it for 900 crowns. You just have to fill in some things, and then the computer make the form for you. So of course I'm using that one, so it's a lot of like losing ground and money. But I think that they have to. We're talking a lot of legal tech and legal design and stuff, because when you have these standardization solutions, you can focus on more like quality work. So you can like be better at things that people actually like value. So I think it's just they just have to like take the fear away and switch perspectives and like, okay, what can we do further? So we have these forms and contracts. It's boring. Like everyone thinks it's boring anyway. So you can have that as a standard. And then do things that you think is funny, or like development. In like you can do so much more in that time, and you still are going to get money from the forms because you're not doing anything.
No.
They're just making themselves. So you're getting money like for free. You're getting money for free, but you're getting easy money. But so I think it's just a fear that is there, but you don't need to have it.
This is something local governments are increasingly discussing, saying we have so many standardized services, and I think that's in Germany probably more than in Sweden, because you have some of these standardized services in state agencies and state authorities. So much of these services, these standardized things, are in Germany in local governments. And so they say, I talked to some of them, and they said, we actually do not want to have these services. They can, from our perspective, they can go to the state. But if not, then they can be standardized, so we could have standardized things, or even transfer these services to the state, and they can do it in a standardized manner. So we gain time and resources for those tasks where we really collaborate with the citizen, where we really have to deliver something face-to-face, where citizens need us as a partner.
As for the doctors, like they can do something standard, and then they can have the rest of the time with the patient, giving them a sense of trygghet. Security or safety, because you're sitting with them and you're making them calm and like really explaining the disease or whatever.
I think also there's certain aspects like finding that you need that sort of human sort of moksha, like intuition. So I've been working on the situation with like people that work with citizens that have huge amount of debt, and so some of the things they're talking about, it's not the economic questions. Like we can get their numbers, as we're talking about how can we digitalize that aspect, how to get their data and their numbers in, and what does that mean for data sharing. But sort of the in-between stuff, like what are the underlying problems that have led you to this situation? We are trying to formulate what kind of questions could actually extract that information from them, like. What is, like a lot of it handles like shame and embarrassment, like I'm an adult and I still have this debt. So we're at this point of thinking like, can we get to that kind of information with, an algorithm? Can we actually scale it so we can see this and map it? Or do we actually need to just have something a little bit more general, just sort of like maybe there's something else here, and then get handed over to the advisor, the counselor, who can then dig deeper and say, like, let's talk about this. It looks like there's something else going on in your home life that's... So I think, when we were looking for cases for digitalization, we tried going out on this route and saying, like to our colleagues in the community, what's the most boring thing that you don't look forward to dealing with each week? And let's start there instead of saying, let's digitalize, opting in.
That's that's actually a really, I don't know if you say it in English as you do in Swedish, but a holistic way of dealing things, like the parts are bigger than the sum. Alltså delarna är större.
And other parts of a service where you need the personal contact, where it's important that it's not an algorithm. I think this distinction needs to be done, and we need to reflect about this, where because this, as you said, the personal contact, the personal intervention, the human interaction might be important for some parts of a service, whilst others can be digitalized. And I think this is also, we dealt with refugee management, for instance. So you can automatize, have a certificate or the allowance to stay or something like this. Yeah, the boring things you can, or they standardize. So where you have repeated things, and where you have also clear a very narrow scope of decision making, where it's very consecutive. So one follows the other, a very logical process, algorithm. But then there is a specific personal situation of someone coming from Syria or whatever with a family and so on. And so then there needs to be a personal interaction. And I think this distinction needs to be made when talking about these digitalization issues.
Yes. No, I'm just sitting here thinking about how naive I've been, about how my ID has been used. Before, so I'm still not with that. But that wasn't my question. My question is, we have a project here now where we're looking at the relations between attitude, the legal stuff, and data use, just to see if we can say that we offer better services and see how people's attitude are towards that, and if they're then willing to let us use their data in another way. And in that case, we also need to develop the legal part. So my question is, can you see, it's about attitudes.
Yeah.
Can you see different attitudes about, I mean, both how the data is used in Germany and the services provided, or services that are expected to be provided between different groups in the society? I mean, due to age or due to ethnicity or something.
And you mean how open they are to make their to give their data, or what do you mean?
Yeah, people are quite negative regarding the historical aspects. I full respect, but can you see, is that the same all over the population?
No, I would say the younger ones, they are much more open. The younger ones are more open. And I think also, for instance, taking again the example of the Corona app, I think it's a good indicator, although it's health issues which are more sensitive than probably birth certificate or driving license. So with the health issues, it's always still a specific topic regarding privacy issues. And therefore, but it was more the younger people downloading the app. So they are, and I know from my daughter, for instance, she says, what about privacy? It doesn't matter. So what is your concern here with privacy? So I think they are more, maybe also naive. Maybe it's also a bit naive. But with them, I think there won't be so much resistance regarding these privacy issues, or this being more open and more open towards your own data, because for them it really counts that a process is facilitated or gets quicker, and that they don't have any trouble with the administration. So, and that's the point for them. And so I think you have, if you would ask this question in a generational with different age groups, you would have a clear picture. I'm convinced.
A leading question is: would that be an indicator that? Because their expectations are different, and that would also make the process faster.
Probably, yeah. Also, when having new laws, new policies, as we're discussing now with the modernization of registries and this tax ID, and if politicians know that there is support in the population, then they will advance it faster, and probably the resistance coming from the Ministry of Justice, which is very strong and opposing to all this, probably they are getting a bit calmer then. So I think if the perspectives of the population changes to some extent, and politicians know that they are getting support, then it will go a bit faster, and resistance are not that legitimate anymore. But it's a process still ongoing, so we are not there yet.
But one last question: are you still following these municipalities in your research, so you can see how it evolves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There will probably be a new project next year.
Fine.
We have submitted a research proposal, which will hopefully be accepted. We don't know yet, but where will we continue? Yeah. Also, specifically this Online Access Act.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking at now what happens with this Online Access Act, and so we will go into this. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this talk.
Thank you too. It was a pleasure.